Hey, everybody. So I got interviewed on a writer's podcast, which is really cool. Writing's really important to me. I take being an author really seriously. And so the interview went really well. I got permission to share it, and I did want to share it with my fans here because I think it's a great interview. I think it's interesting. I hope people enjoy. If you don't, this is all new footage from my current map. Maybe the footage will be interesting, if nothing else. I hope people enjoy.
Soundstripe.
Hey, this is Amy L. Watkins here with you at the Kensington Row Bookshop, and this is Rock, Paper, Write, where we hope to celebrate, elevate, motivate, and inspire you. Tonight we are here with David Fueling. How are you, David?
I'm really well. Thank you for having me.
Good. I'm so happy to have you here with us. I'm going to give a little brief intro and then we'll jump right into the questions. So, David Fueling has written one novel, three novellas, and over 70 short stories. His works have been translated into several languages for international publication and have also been adapted into animated, narrated, podcast, and live action features. I cannot wait to hear all about this.
It's going to be fun for sure.
Yes. David has been writing since 2008, where he first got his start online by writing horror for an emerging scene of internet subculture. So, David, I want to jump into your book, The American Demon Waltz. It's described as a trilogy of novellas. I know there's Bravo Juliet, Witness to Those Waiting, and is it Vechnaya La Vista?
That's pretty good. Vishnaia Levica. I have a copy here just for a visual, and
Beautiful.
it's a I'm very proud of it. It's a series of three novellas that I really did almost as a study when I was first learning how to really structure. As you mentioned, I've done a lot of short stories, and they're a lot easier in some ways because you can really build a tight structure and then just kind of execute that structure. But a novel has to have character development, all these things. So I wrote this trilogy of novellas to kind of explore that, and yeah, it turned out pretty good. I'm proud of it. I've written novellas since then, but this one was really special as my first, full-length novel.
Yes, and I think it's so cool because I think sometimes people, depending on whether it's the amount of time you have or, if you just feel like a huge book is just too much to handle. And I
Mhm.
love the idea of the three little novellas all in one.
I
What,
definitely I recommend that to anyone out there who doesn't know how to start because like with plays too, it's a three act structure, so it's
Mhm.
actually perfect. It'll help you structure it in a classic way where there's a clear beginning, middle, and end and everything. So I recommend that highly in general.
That's that is a good connection. I'm a high school teacher. We're reading The Crucible right now, and
Right.
it's like Act One, Act Two, Act Three. So if you think about it like that, I really like this a lot with the three novellas. But with that, I wanted to ask you, the series blends elements of survival horror and science fiction. So how did you approach integrating these genres, and then what challenges did you encounter with that?
So I was definitely excited for this question because I think it's a great one. I would say that horror and science fiction are neighbors in that so much of it is just if you have an idea, like a central idea of something really crazy that might happen, then you really just have pure creativity to build around that. And I think I even mentioned in my first pure science fiction novel or novella, that one's not a full-length novel, but science fiction is tougher because it takes a lot of world building. You have to think of why things happen. Horror is very special because you can just say a ghost happened for no reason and just have characters deal with that. But I would say that they're joined by the fact that it's very imagination based, and so you can really just have any kind of fun with it that you like to.
I love that. I wonder, what was your writing process like then for this trilogy? Like, did you write each novella sequentially, or were they developed simultaneously? How did you do that?
Yeah, that's that, and that's something I'd like to I participated in the local author events, also kindly hosted, and
Uh-huh.
that's something I'd like to explore with more writers because I feel like I develop them sequentially, just to answer that question.
Okay. Uh-huh.
But I had, and I always have this where I'll have great ideas that don't fit yet. And so I say that they have to be in the
Mhm.
next story. And I remember like I was in an embassy applying for a visa when I figured out the ending to The American Demon Waltz, the final ending of the third act. And I got like emotional in public because
Um,
it was such a good plot that I had figured out, but I hadn't written there yet. So it's definitely a combination of sequential planning. I definitely recommend having like an idea board, having bullet points, uh, and that really, really helps. But then also when your imagination really runs wild and you want to do a certain scene, then try to find a way to put that in uh,
mhm.
non-sequentially.
Yes. Um, and so then as an author, how do you approach character development then, especially for protagonists in high stakes environments?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question too before we got started,
Mhm.
and I think of I'm a big fan of Vonnegut, Kurt Vonnegut.
Okay, uh-huh.
And he his advice for writing characters, which is very easy to like, it's a great place to start, is to just really test them. If you just give a character enough problems, and then you have to help them, think of how to get through these problems, that'll give you a lot of insight into, it's an imaginary person, but what kind of person they are. And then I think the reader or the audience really, if they're along for that journey, uh, they'll start to see the flaws. Oh, that's the other thing I was going to mention. In writing groups, we talk about Mary Sue's, this
Uh-huh.
where it's like it's a character who's good at everything, and it's not very interesting to read.
Right.
Um, and so I think if you just try to write someone who is at least a little grounded, maybe a little like you, even
Hmm.
just, has your same foibles. You think to yourself, oh, I wish I had done that better. Maybe the character can struggle with that. And then the adventure they go on is going to really shape them into a hero or whatever kind of real character that you want them to be. But by then, it'll be really complex. And you know what? That's one more thing I'll say about the writing three novellas and then doing kind of a fix-up novel with those same characters is that it lets you experiment almost like seasons of a TV show where you can
Mm.
have a good guy have kind of a bad guy arc or vice versa, and you can kind of play with the characters and then they get more complicated in an interesting way.
I love that. And I want to know, in terms of the three different novellas,
Hmm.
do the characters overcross at all?
Yeah, so absolutely.
Mm.
And I should get more into that. That's a great
Mhm.
question. Thank you. So it starts with a soldier who is kind of like secret operative in the 70s, and she discovers kind of science fiction secrets that make her, get her into these kind of like Illuminati groups. It's a little like, world
Mhm.
conspiracy stuff. But
Uh-huh.
so the second novella is just kind of a continuation of that in the 80s, and then the third one is kind of early 90s and is the end of that story. And so all the characters are evolve together. It's again, it's kind of a horror, so some characters do not make it to the end or something, so they don't have as interesting of character arcs. But the characters by the end, the core team, I would say, is probably some of my best character writing because I have stayed with them for 30 or 40 chapters. So if you ask me how one of these characters would respond to something, I could probably think of it pretty quickly. Even I think this was published in 2019, but I could still tell you about these characters' personalities and how they would respond to things.
Do you have a favorite character?
The main character is a really great hero.
Yeah.
Bobby Bulk she is brave. To talk about like character development,
Hmm.
she is very brave and strong, and she uh maybe learns to be less trusting by the end of it. That's kind of one her character flaw that she works through.
Hmm.
And she's definitely the hero of the story without spoiling too much. So I would have to say emotionally, yeah, the main character is my favorite. She's definitely a classic hero.
Nice. I wanted to ask, what advice would you have to offer to aspiring authors who are interested in writing within the survival horror or science fiction genres?
Sure. And those are the main genres that this novel is from. But I would say any kind of horror is a great way to get started. And actually, in my intro we talked a little bit about like the internet subculture,
Yes.
these all these multimedia things. I
Yeah.
would say that horror has maybe a bad reputation because it's scary and
Hmm.
it can be easy to do, which makes it sometimes cheap, but how easy it is in terms of just kind of flexing your imagination on something simple. And I remember one of the best things where I really knew I wanted to write was um, when I realized that I could write a short horror story with a great twist, a hook. So, I would even do flash fiction. So like it would be less than 10 sentences, and I would say this, and it would get scarier and scarier. And then there would be a subversion right at the end. And I just got such a reaction from that on early, storytelling forums and things like that.
Uh-huh.
So I would just say if you are interested, you can start with horror very easily, and it doesn't even have to necessarily make too much sense. Just make it exciting and an interesting idea, and it'll be great.
I like that. I wanted to know, I have another question for you, but I did want to ask you, there was something I read about how online horror has evolved from creepy pastas to AGRs to modern mixed media and video, or even video games.
I
There's a whole lot within that I need you to kind of break down for me.
I'm really glad you asked, and thank you. I would
Uh-huh.
say it there, and you might even have to remind me the bullet points as we go through it. But
Yes,
no,
it starts with online horror
and
that evolved to
creepypasta.
creepy
So
pastas.
I'll do a quick
Uh,
history of the whole thing. So in the early
Okay.
days of the internet, when people really didn't even know how to use the internet too much, like maybe half of the population was on it, locally in the West and things.
Mhm.
Telling urban legends, sharing urban legends that already existed, and especially making them up was really, really popular. I remember blogs in the early, before 2010. Someone would just hear horror stories in Japanese, they were living in Japan, and they
Mhm.
could just translate it, and they would bring it for the first time because the internet was still new. They would bring it for the first time to a Western audience, and I remember staying up all night and getting so scared reading all these stories I'd never. So that's what creepypasta is, and without going into too much nerd culture stuff, it's because
Okay.
you can easily copy and paste it. That's a
Oh, okay.
creepypasta, and so
Uh-huh.
a creepy copy pasta is a creepypasta. But
Okay.
so that's where I got my start, and you can still, if you Google my name, you'll see it was basically just a community where people were making up scary stories, short ones that were
Yeah.
easy to copy and paste, and that's where I first got my taste for an audience that where people pour in and they say, "Oh, this is great," and I want to keep doing that. But so that was the beginning of it. ARGs are something that came after that, and it has to do with multimedia. I guess that's what because I don't think we have time for everything, but the one message I want to talk about is multimedia, like um, especially with everyone has a video grade camera,
Mhm.
things like that. Um, and again, even making games is not too off limits to the average person. There's so many ways that you can have your audience interact with and really break the fourth wall. So you can have an audience that really like discovers things in your art, and it's too much to go into in one. But I am glad that you brought it up.
I love the idea of it though. And I said AGR. I should have said ARG because it's
ARG, right?
alternate reality games, right?
That's right. And that was also early, kind of
Uh,
early to 2010s in the early internet. Um, a famous one is called I Love Bees, and it's a whole. Turned out to be an advertisement. The first ones were just advertisements, but now artists do them. But it was the story of an AI that has gone back in time and taken over a website, and it's doing coded messages in this website that you can
uh,
maybe decode. Very, very fun, very interactive. And I guess it inspired me. I mean, 15 years later, one of my novellas is called The Lossy Incident, and it's kind of a surreal, kind of a mind-bending horror science fiction thing, but I tried to put puzzles in it that would be three-dimensional. Uh,
That's so cool.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's really
interesting.
cool. So have you, okay, let me see. So how does that work? Okay, because then you said to modern mixed media, video, or even video games. So have your novellas evolved into video or video games?
Thank you. That's another great question.
Uh-huh.
So my one of my first creepypastas that I wrote in 2010 was has been adapted to short film several times. So
Mhm.
it's called the Thing That Stalks the Fields. It's not even very good. I was honestly practicing as a high school student, but it was I guess captivating at a time when the
Mhm.
market was pretty small. So
Mhm.
that one has a few short videos that are great. Um, I have a poem that's been animated. Um, I was published in Science Fiction World in China. They did custom illustrations. I should have that. I don't have that here. But
Okay.
but I guess the main thing I would want to talk about moving forward is that I'm writing a fantasy novella right now. Again,
Okay.
according to my strategy, it's proof of concept. If I can do a good novella, then I
Mhm.
can expand it and maybe write a fantasy novel. But part of that is I'm also learning a game making engine, which is how most games these days are made in with game making engines. And there's a
Mhm.
very simple, relatively simple one called RPG Maker.
Okay.
Uh, and so I am working on a game version as I write this to try to help me think through it. Which this is probably not, no one's going to find that useful as advice, but if you find it easy to code a game, easier to code a game, or to do anything, to draw,
Mhm.
um, and you're like, oh, but I can't write it. I would encourage you to do what you feel most comfortable doing because you can make more progress, figure out what the story is and what the world is going to be, and then um, the work is done. You can refer to that as your writing.
Right. I love that. I remember when I was in college,
Hmm.
my freshman year, I took an art class, and one of our assignments was to make a board game for somebody else in the class based on, certain information that they gave us. And I
Interesting.
was, and I write children's books, and I was thinking that it would be kind of cool to make I was thinking more along the lines of a board game kind of a thing that would go with my books. So I love the idea of having video games. Because we've talked about some authors have talked about little videos, short clips that they've made, but to
Right.
have a whole video game, especially with your genre, I think that would be so cool.
Well, that's interesting. I just had a brain blast because I would say, especially with your genre as well,
Yeah.
with children's stuff, it's definitely different markets, but you could I think anything interactive is
Yeah,
great and is going to get people engaged. Um,
definitely.
and yeah.
And I wanted to ask you too about all the different languages.
Oh yeah.
You said your work has been translated into several languages for international publication. So how did you do that? What languages? How did that all come about?
So that is a really cool thing that I had a little bit of a weird career because I published on the internet for free
Okay.
for a long time, but under my real name. So most people will either not publish on the internet or they'll publish under a pseudonym. But so
Okay.
I was always like, I'm David Fueling, these are my stories. And the nice part of that is that you have this big fan base that can get immediately in touch with you because it's the internet.
Mhm.
So I have had um, Swedish, I want to say Spanish, Portuguese, Swedish, certainly Chinese, and I'm thinking of specific stories where a fan approached me and said, "Hey, can I translate this and use it, on my own blog?"
Mhm.
Exactly like when I was talking about in 2008, where someone would just translate a story and bring it in for the first time into a language. And I always say fine, absolutely. I ask them, can I use it as well? They usually say
Mhm.
fine. In the case of my best, my best, most popular, like when I think of Science Fiction World, which again I'm really proud of, that's a big science fiction magazine out of China that has
Mhm.
published like big Netflix deal things. And I'm very proud to be featured. That translation was actually done by my wife as
Oh,
kind of
wow.
as a challenge. She is bilingual, and as
Wow.
kind of a lark, she did that one, and that's especially a very good short story, I would say. If you're curious, The name is Renaud Herbert Hansen. Uh,
Renaud Herbert Hansen.
yeah, it's a long,
Okay.
ornate name, but
Okay.
if you get my name and most of that, it should come up. And it's about maybe the pitfalls of immortality.
Okay.
So that one, my wife liked enough that she translated and submitted, and we ended up getting in.
And that one she translated into what?
Uh, Standard Chinese.
Okay, standard Chinese. Nice. That's really cool. I like that. I have two bilingual books now that are Spanish
Right.
English. And it kind of a similar situation where somebody approached me and asked, hey, would you want me to translate those for you? So that's so cool that, not only did you have your wife involved, but even a fan to ask you.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's always really nice and yeah, usually pretty positive because they're asking just can I use this? Can I feature it? My rule for I guess over 15 years now has been fans can do whatever they want with my work as long as they check in with me so I'm aware it's happening
Right.
and and credit my name.
Yes.
Usually no money or anything like that. And the result is that I get a lot of basically free animations, illustrations, translations, because you work with the fans. You say, if you want to make content with my content, that's awesome. Like
Yeah,
together.
definitely. What about the cover of your book? How did that come
Hmm.
about?
So this cover I'm very proud of, and I'll even give him a shout out.
Hmm.
His name is Ian Boley. He's a
Okay,
well, he was a college student when this came out. He may be graduated by now. And sorry, it's not coming up, but
that's okay.
beautiful, handmade, no AI, um, illustration, and it actually depicts. And again, sorry for my blur,
That's okay.
but each cover and the spine is actually dedicated to one of the three novellas. So the front cover is the first novella,
Hmm.
and the back cover is the third, is the ending, and the
Hmm.
spine is actually the middle. He's credited in the book as well.
Hmm.
And I would say that as well. Uh, that's the other part is, maybe if you don't have internet fans that are just offering to do things, work with your fellow writers, work with your fellow
Hmm.
artists
Yeah.
because you'll find probably a buddy who can do the thing that you're not as good at, and then it looks great and it looks professional by the end.
Right. That's a great tip right there. I want to find out about future projects, which I know you talked a little bit about, but are there any plans to expand upon the universe that you've created in the American Demon Waltz, or are you exploring new themes and stories in upcoming works?
So yeah, I
I know
was
you kind of said about fantasy.
right. So yeah, this is an exciting question too for a few reasons. So the American Demon Waltz does actually have a science fiction spin-off called Octara, which is available on Amazon. And that is, I would say, one of my first pure science fiction novellas. It's a novella,
Okay.
but that takes place in the same universe. And then I have this one by coincidence. I'm getting a little bit redundant. So this is the Three
Oh,
Edge game. This is another novella science fiction that
oh,
I'm doing I think Stephen King taught me this trick, but it's a good one, which
uh-huh.
is that if you've already done world building, like if you've already made a cool science fiction, for example, in this, I made an alternate version of the internet. Oh, I published Ogdara right before the advent of Reels AI, and it has an
Okay.
AI in it, so that's interesting.
Oh, very
It's
cool.
it's like my predictions of AI right before it happened. But
Wow.
so I did that world building already, so that exists in the Three Edge game as well. I haven't really thought about it, but I guess they're in the same universe as well.
Uh-huh.
So all of that kind of comes from the American Demon Waltz, and but I'm also trying to branch out and just do a totally new. The Churning Fields is the working title of my fantasy novella. I would say I'm like 15% done, and again I'm working on it as a video game as well, just to help me visualize. But so that has nothing to do with it. But that would be my advice to anybody out there is just if you have good world building, reuse it. Feel
Right.
like you worked hard on that cool idea.
And then
Feel
your
free.
readers are familiar with it, so I'm sure that
Right.
helps too. Right. Yeah.
Readers are familiar. If
Yeah.
they're a big fan of your work, if they're not a big fan of your work and they missed it the first time, then they get exposed to the cool idea the first time, which
And
is
then they'll
also
want to go back to your first book.
right.
Yeah.
Hopefully, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's great. It has been so much fun talking to you and hearing about all
Yeah.
these, these worlds that you've created. And I love the idea of the video game connection also. I wanted to ask you, we have the Kensington Day of the Book Festival coming up. Will you be there? And if not, what else? How can our readers and our listeners get more of you?
Right. I am sorry to say I may not be at the Kensington Row Book Fair Day of the Book this year. I
Okay.
really was trying to make it because that is a great event. I would say any local writers, readers, this is such a good group.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I would say, and my social media is also in a state of flux. I would say any readers or fans who want to check me out, David Fueling, Feuling, just like on the title card here.
Yeah.
You should see a bunch of social media and books and things pop up. I try to be responsive on any of those. So if you hit me up, I'll try to write you back as soon as I can. Um, Amazon KDP, all the good ones, all the standard ones. And I guess the only other thing would be I put this in my books as well, but for any if you really need to get in touch with me about a project offer or anything, my name david.fueling@gmail.com uh, gets a response within a day. So
Perfect. And we'll put all that in the description. And
thank you.
then we also have you on the Kensington Row Bookshop. We have your author page on there, which has all of your connections too.
Oh, awesome.
Yes, yes. So that is wonderful.
Love
We
to hear it.
definitely want to stay in touch with you and can't wait to see your upcoming works.
Yeah, absolutely. If you ever need a co-host or anything, I'd love to be back on the podcast. It's been a lot of fun.
That would be great. That would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you,
look
Amy,
forward
very
to
much.
that. I
Thank
will
you.
definitely hit you up on that.
Sounds great.
All right. Well, this has been Rock, Paper, Right? And we will see you next time. Thank you, David.
Thank you.